It's difficult to hear about senseless killings on a regular basis, especially when the victims are people who look like me. There have been at least 13 demonstrations by Black Lives Matter since the Ferguson protests. The question has been raised, why does this conflict remain? One of the issues that needs to be raised by this question is the fact that the senseless killings of black people and racially motivated violence toward our community have been going on for a long time in the United States. In terms of police brutality and related deaths of black people, we may be seeing more stories than we ever have before due to the technology of phones with video recording functions. Black Lives Matter aims to make aware the racially oriented violence and the systemic racism in government institutions that perpetuate it. We haven't determined whether or not this violence has been reduced or if it has escalated, but we are seeing more through social media. Outside of social media strategies, in-person nonviolent protests have been a consistent strategy used by Black Lives Matter. Perhaps because of this consistency, there may be counter strategies by some government entities in order to discredit the movement. One example of this is police going undercover, posing as protesters at demonstrations and pretending to meet the police with violence in order for the police to use force against actual protesters. This means that there are intentional efforts by some police departments to make the Black Lives Matter movement appear as something other than what it is, a nonviolent effort to interrupt harm being done in black communities. Another example, as we saw in Dallas, was the opportunity that the police tried to take when a sniper killed police during a protest, claiming to news outlets that a Black Lives Matter member, Mark Hughes, was responsible for the killings. Luckily, his brother Corey Hughes saw the news and found news reporters to set the record straight. Consequently, the person that the police said confessed to the shootings isn't around to speak for himself on the matter because they killed him with a bomb. In terms of social media strategies that Black Lives Matter uses, there continue to be counter strategies by people on social media and news media outlets like Fox News and Breitbart News who publish false stories intended to divert or discredit the movement. When it comes to the aim of Black Lives Matter, they have been consistent in their awareness-raising efforts, and this strategy has been effective in terms of disrupting the privilege of government entities committing violence toward the black community without any sense of accountability. However, this deep-rooted evil that has plagued our country remains. The reason that this conflict remains is that though the awareness raising of police, institutional, and other forms of systemic racial violence bring white privilege onto the radar of people in the U.S. as well as on the international level, it has not been explicit in its attempt to actually resolve the conflict. This may have not been within the original scope of the cause. Many of us who imagine and work at making the world a better place do so under the assumption that we will not resolve anything completely. However, if efforts were considered that engage the perpetrators, this would be a step further in what I have been calling awareness raising and the necessary disruption of privileged systems that come with it. When I consider the nonviolent demonstrations that Black Lives Matter is known for, there is coordination with the police when planning a protest. News media usually doesn't cover this step in their stories, a redaction that is probably intended to maximize the drama of the narrative that they broadcast. I never considered the possibility that there was coordination with the police in planning a protest, even though it only makes sense. It really didn't catch my attention until Mark Hughes was put on the news as a sniper suspect, and his brother debunked the claim, noting that Mark had been working with the police regarding the protest. However, this coordination is not the type of communication that I am referring to. What I am talking about is an effort to open a dialogue with the police departments, possibly those where protests have occurred, and give not only space for Black communities to tell their stories of the violence that they have been experiencing at the hands of those who claim their purpose is to protect and serve, but also space and opportunity for police departments to admit that they have done harm in the communities that they have claimed to serve. On some level, we have seen police officers make attempts at this admittance. Shortly after the Alton Sterling killing in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, this year, Nakia Jones, a police officer that serves the Warrenville, Ohio community, took to social media and made her lament of not only the violence within her community, but the racism that she knows exists in the police departments that she has served in. Again, though this was an effort at reconciliation, an invitation needs to be offered in areas where harm is being done, where the police departments can admit that they are causing harm in the Black community. Mark Dayton, governor of Minnesota, also made an attempt at acknowledging the harm done in the Black community when, in a press conference shortly after the killing of Philando Castile, he stated that he didn't believe that the Black man would have been killed if he and his girlfriend were white, and that his administration, as well as the rest of Minnesota, has to admit that racism exists. I believe that his statement was a genuine attempt at steps toward healing in Minnesota and indirectly the United States. Though it was not an explicit admittance that the government was responsible for harm in the Black community, or that harm has been done under his administration, I believe that a more effective healing can take place with this type of admittance.